Hello, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name is Amy Schamberg, and I am so excited to be here this evening talking to you about youth mental health and nutrition and how we can support the mental health of our children by using nutritional interventions. I am a Challenge School parent. I have been in the Challenge community for a very long time. I started off as a school psychologist in the district back in 2009. I'm also a functional medicine health coach. So that's where my interest in nutrition and my training in nutrition and all of that came from. And I'm just really excited today because, I do believe that having worked in school mental health for as long as I have, and also having that functional nutrition, functional medicine background leads to a pretty unique perspective on how we can support the health and mental health of our children in a natural and holistic way. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we can just dive right in. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, here we go. Awesome. Okay, so before we begin, I do just want to give one disclosure that I am not a doctor and I'm not a dietitian. So if you come across any information that I shared today and you're wondering how that might, help or hinder your children, I definitely suggest that you reach out to their pediatrician because, as I mentioned, I am a school psychologist and a functional medicine health coach, but not a doctor. Okay, with that being said, let's dive in. So I'm sure you have all heard on the news or if you've read that children's mental health is in crisis. And there's just a lot going on with our kids right now. Way back in December 2021, the Surgeon General's Advisory on Protecting Youth Mental Health actually called the childhood mental health crisis a national emergency. So when we look at what are the main mental health diagnoses given to children ages 3 to 17, you can see that those are ADHD, anxiety, depression, and behavior problems. So I listed on the screen the prevalence rate of these clinical diagnoses in children pre-pandemic. And you can see ADHD was around 10%, anxiety was just a little bit below that, depression was at 4.4%, and behavior disorders were at 8.9%. Now, this doesn't mean that that's the number of children who were struggling with these concerns. That's just the number of the children who received formal clinical diagnoses. However, recent research has found that depression and anxiety has at least doubled during the pandemic. I actually saw a statistic yesterday that said that it has increased a little bit more than that, almost 75%. So, there's just a lot going on with our kids these days. They have a lot to deal with, and it's really impacting their ability to learn in the classroom. So, when we think about how we can support our kids, I think it's first important to understand, what's really going on for them. And when we're coping with a mental health problem, whether that's ADHD or anxiety or behavior problem or depression, it really presents a unique challenge for children to meet the demands of the classroom of school, whether that is paying attention and completing their work or just getting along with others, regulating their emotions, keeping up academically. They've got a lot going on, and it's important to kind of keep this in mind when we talk about, why we need to take some steps in order to make things a little bit easier for our children. So I want you to just imagine, if our kids were able to stay focused and engaged and present so that they can learn and walk away every day with information that, enriches them and that they're excited about. What if our children were able to handle setbacks with grace and just feel confident in their ability to persevere when they do encounter struggles? Or imagine if our children were able to remain mindful during social conflicts and work together to solve problems. That's a big one, right? So, we don't actually have to imagine it. There's not one single solution to completely reduce the risk of developing mental health conditions for kids and teens. But the great news is we do have a simple tool at our disposal as parents. So nutrition. Okay, nutrition is an essential tool for decreasing the stress response. Healthy eating helps children and all people cope more effectively with stress, better manage their emotions, and all of these things assist learning, right? Um, and anecdotally, I have seen firsthand the connection between food and mood and behavior. I have had the pleasure of working with thousands of children and teens over the past 13 years or so. And whether it was at an elementary school or at a high school, anytime I was called in to help with a student who was having a meltdown in some capacity, whether that's behaviorally or emotionally, through the course of our conversation, I have always kind of checked in with kids about, what's the last thing you ate? Or, what'd you have for breakfast today? And so many times I have heard, well, I haven't had any breakfast, or maybe they have been eating, but when I start asking what they've been eating, it's, Pop Tarts and energy drinks and all kinds of like sugary things. And, I started to kind of understand that there was a connection between behavior and nutrition anecdotally years and years and years ago. Then in 2020, when I was studying to become a functional medicine health coach, I began to really understand the science behind what I had noticed all those years, both with the students I worked with and with my own children. So through that, I became really interested in the field of nutritional psychology. And really what this is, it's just the study of the role of nutrition in mental health. So like I said before, food equals mood. That is 100% true. And the great news is there is science that backs this up so that we can, as parents, as caregivers, learn how to best provide for our kiddos in a way that supports their mood. So, bear with me here. We need to go over a bit of science in order to understand just how food can help support our children's mental health, learning, and relationships. So I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds, but I do think it's important to go over a bit of information regarding the gut-brain connection. Okay, so here we go. The brain and the gastrointestinal system are intimately connected. And recent research actually shows that our brain affects our gut health, and even more importantly, our gut health affects our brain health. So the communication system between our gut and our brain is called the gut-brain axis. Research has also shown that what we eat can have an effect on our mental health and emotions because of the gut-brain connection. So specifically, what we eat influences our gut microbiome. And that just means, the types of bacteria that are present in our gut. Scientists have identified, I think it's around 100 trillion types of bacteria in our gut. And these bacteria do all sorts of things. They help us digest food, they help us synthesize vitamins, they make hormones, they support our immune system, and they create neurotransmitters. And this is where it gets really interesting, especially when it comes to nutritional psychology. So new research has shown that over 95% of the body's production of serotonin, which is the mood stabilizing chemical, is actually produced in the gut. And this is so incredibly profound because past schools of thought believe that serotonin was primarily produced in the brain since it's a neurotransmitter or brain chemical. But with, more understanding of the gut-brain axis, scientists have discovered multiple brain chemicals originating in the gut. So they've also found that gut bacteria produce the neurotransmitters dopamine and GABA, which all play a key role in mood. So, when our gut bugs are in balance, our bodies and minds are also in balance, and, everything's going well. However, there are also times when our gut microbiome becomes imbalanced, which is called dysbiosis. And in a healthy, balanced gut, all the cells lining the GI tract fit together nice and tight, kind of like Legos. And, what's really cool is that in our GI tract, our intestines are actually only one cell thick. It's incredible. But then there's this phenomenon called leaky gut, which you may have heard of. Leaky gut happens when there are holes in the GI tract. So it's like those tight junctions, Legos coming together, when those start to kind of come apart, that's when the holes develop. And that causes leaky gut. And so this comes from all sorts of things. certain foods, stress, antibiotics, all of these things can cause leaky gut. And that allows substances to get into the bloodstream that shouldn't, which then triggers an immune response because the body doesn't recognize these foreign invaders. And so then it goes into attack mode to remove them. And this immune response then leads to inflammation throughout the body. And I know this is a lot of science, but bear with me because it's important. Inflammation is a known cause of anxiety and depression. So when our body is inflamed, that can lead to depression and anxiety. Also, as I mentioned a moment ago, 95% of serotonin, that happy hormone, is produced in the gut, along with other important feel-good hormones like dopamine and GABA. But that only happens if the gut is healthy. So if the microbiome is out of balance, or if it's damaged and we have a leaky gut, then we're not able to sufficiently produce serotonin and all those other hormones that I mentioned, which then lead us to feel moody and irritable and depressed and anxious. So therefore, we need to have a happy, healthy gut in order to have a healthy, happy mind. So research has found a direct link between the foods we eat and mental health. And, at this point, you might be wondering which foods are helpful, which foods are harmful. And, overall, we all know the answer, right? We know that ultra-processed foods that are high in added sugars or refined carbohydrates are not good for our bodies. And the cool thing is that research has recently shown that eating these types of foods actually induces cravings, drives inflammation, and then kind of perpetuates the symptoms that are associated with depression and anxiety. And as an example, sugar has been shown to exacerbate irritability and difficulties with focusing and anxiety. And I think any of us who have ever fed our kids a cupcake or, have picked them up after the Valentine's Day party can attest to this because, it's kind of like giving them crack. And, the thing is, and we'll get to this here in a little bit. I am certainly not advocating for the removal of all treats and sugary things, but I think it's just kind of important to keep in mind that, there is some scientific backing that when kids ingest certain foods, it does cause detrimental effects. Increased sugar tolerance has been linked to increased risk of depression. Too much sugar just really disrupts the mind-body balance. There is a really amazing, brilliant psychiatrist, a nutritional psychiatrist, Dr. Uma Naidoo out of Harvard. She has done decades of work showing how food influences the way we feel and think. And according to her, there are certain things that help us, like turmeric and black pepper have been shown to decrease depressive symptoms. And there are certain foods that have been shown to really, increase those problematic mental health conditions like we've been talking about. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today. I could talk a whole other story about things like gluten and dairy, but I'm not going to do that right now. I want to just kind of focus on what we can add into our children's kind of, weekly rotation so that we can start to cultivate an appreciation for foods that are helpful for their bodies. Because let's be honest, the struggle is real. We are all busy parents who love our kids and we're doing the best we can. And I know that it can feel overwhelming to hear some of this information. But like I said before, I do think it's important to have this scientific understanding as we begin to consider what we can do differently. Because, at the end of the day, as long as we're feeding our kids, that is the most important thing. But if we have the bandwidth, if we have the capacity to try some other things, that could really benefit them as well. And I want to acknowledge that food is really personal, right? Food connects us to our past. It connects us to our culture. It's a connection to friends and family. It's part of our celebrations and our ceremonies. But I also want to highlight that food is information. So just like important decisions need to be based on good information, proper nutrition turns on good genes in our body. So nutrition really has a significant role in determining whether or not and the degree to which an illness or condition will present, whether that's a mental health condition or otherwise. And the great news is we don't have to do a complete overhaul to start noticing positive benefits. We can start small, we can start now and make incremental changes over time because our bodies are really incredible machines. And the best way to support the gut-brain connection and improve the mental health of our kids is to add in what heals while removing what harms gradually. So I'm going to take just a few minutes reviewing some of the recommendations for what to eat, and then I'd like to spend the rest of our time talking about how to actually make some of these shifts. So what should we eat? I've got two recommendations, and the first one is whole or minimally processed food. So whole foods are minimally processed. They're free from any additives or artificial substances. They're nutrient dense. They're easily recognizable to our system. So, you might consider adding one or more of these foods to your weekly rotation. Of course, there are many more examples of whole foods or minimally processed foods, but I just wanted to kind of throw a few out there. And another good rule of thumb is when we are purchasing something that's in a package, take a look at the ingredients. And do we recognize those ingredients? Can we pronounce those ingredients? And if the answer is yes, then I would say that's, a pretty good choice of processed food. And, you might also consider trying to choose processed foods that have less than 10 ingredients. And that's just something to consider as you're making some shifts to your family's, weekly meal plan or grocery shopping list. And then the other piece of advice that I often give is to eat as many colors as possible. So, eat the rainbow. I don't mean Skittles. You can ask kids, how many different colors can you eat in a day? So I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to go over the profound significance of colorful plant foods. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about something called phytonutrients, which are also known as phytochemicals. And these are plant-based compounds with a wide range of anti-inflammatory health benefits. These are the compounds that give plants their color, and they really provide the human body with an abundance of critical nutrients. They stimulate enzymes that perform a variety of health functions that lead to a reduction in inflammation and improve the stress response. So you remember I said a little while ago that inflammation can lead to things like depression and anxiety. Well, eating colorful foods full of phytonutrients lowers that inflammation, thereby lowering the risk of those mental health conditions. So scientists have identified more than 25,000 different phytonutrients. Fruits and vegetables are incredibly rich sources of these phytonutrients, along with whole grains or beans or herbs, spices, nuts, seeds, and teas. So, any color that you see contains phytonutrients. So the other piece to remember too, for optimal mind-body wellness and a healthy gut-brain connection, it's important to eat fruits and vegetables or the other things that I mentioned from a variety of color categories every day. Small amounts of many colors is better than large amounts of a few. So rather than, an entire container of baby carrots for a snack, it would be better to have, maybe 2 baby carrots and a couple bell peppers and a few slices of cucumber and a strawberry and a couple of grapes, something like that. So with that being said, I know that this thought is on some people's mind and I want to acknowledge it, right? Some kids are just like, no, I'm not going to eat that plate of broccoli that you put in front of me, Mom. I'm not going to eat those carrots. And I get it. But there's a really interesting fact that I want to share, which is going back to the microbiome. So I've talked a lot about our gut and what's going on in there. The bacteria in our microbiome crave what we feed them. So what that means is our cravings, so whatever we're craving, it actually comes from the bacteria living in our gut. And remember, there's about 100 trillion of those bacteria. So that means if a child is used to eating processed foods, very sweet, sugary foods, if that's what they're used to eating, then that's what their gut is going to crave. But the great news is by introducing a wider variety of whole colorful foods and swapping out some of those processed foods, some of those sugary foods, the composition of the microbiome will begin to shift. And eventually, if we can greatly reduce the frequency of sugary foods, we can starve out the bad bugs and replace them with the good bugs, and they'll actually start to crave more healthful foods. So, it kind of turns out that that old saying, you are what you eat, really is true. Okay, so how do we do all of this? I really, really can't emphasize enough the importance of starting small and going slow. I shared a lot of information, but I don't want anyone to leave this presentation thinking that they have to do a complete overhaul of their kitchen, because that's not that's kind of setting ourselves up to struggle, to feel stressed, and that's not the point at all. So start small and go slow, and kind of begin with the end in mind. So think ahead to 3 months from now. Ideally, where would you like to see things, with regard to what your kids are eating every day, perhaps with regard to meal planning or meal prepping, what you're doing as a family around meals? What is a realistic goal 3 months from now? And then kind of work backwards and start to reverse engineer that, right? So perhaps, in 3 months, I'd like my family to eat a home cooked dinner 4 nights a week. Or in 3 months, I'd like my children to eat at least 6 different colors of fruits and vegetables every day. Just kind of think about what that end goal is and then work backwards, because before we know how to start, we really need to identify where we want to be and then start slowly. So choose just one thing to add or change each week. So maybe that's adding a side of berries with breakfast, or maybe that's adding some, carrots and cucumbers with hummus for lunch. Just one thing. Make it so simple that it doesn't feel like a chore, that it doesn't feel like one more thing on the to-do list, and kind of build on that momentum. And another important thing to consider, especially when we're talking about changing food for children, is to add and replace rather than completely remove to reduce resistance, right? Because if we go and clean out the pantry and throw out all the Z-bars and the potato chips and, all the things that they love, and, put in granola and raw almonds and, let them know that there's a fridge full of colorful fruits and vegetables, they're not going to be very happy. And then that's going to cause some other problems when they are in a situation where they can make their own choices and we're not there to provide them with their food. So start slow, start small, take it easy. We don't want to create resistance from the beginning. So some other tips and tricks for buy-in, at the end of the day, we are our kids' models, right? They are listening to us all the time. They're watching us all the time, and we must walk the talk. So that's something to consider. What are you willing to maybe do a little differently or shift? And then get excited about it and talk about the benefits, because when they see that we're excited about something, they get excited about it. If we moan and groan about how we have to change something or do something differently, then they're going to pick up on that and they're going to, feel that exact same way. And another really important piece to consider when we want to get kids to buy in is that we need to involve them. So, let them come to the grocery store when you're, going grocery shopping. Make it into kind of like a game. Can you notice all the different colors? What's something new that you haven't seen before? The other day, for example, I took my kids grocery shopping with me out of necessity, not because I really wanted to. But anyways, we found a papaya, and we've eaten papaya before. We were in Mexico not too long ago and enjoyed the papaya there, but I've never actually purchased one. I had no idea how to prepare it or cut it or anything. But it was kind of like a little adventure. We made it fun. So we bought the papaya and we brought it home and we got online and figured out what to do with it. And it was great. Some other ideas. Can you plan one meal together per week? Can you get the kids to help, decide what to make and create a list of the ingredients, and then make a shopping list and plan a time to go shopping together, plan a time to prep the food together, and then cook it together. And if you're not sure how to prepare something, kids love getting online. So ask them to Google it and have them help, or, follow along to a YouTube tutorial, learn something new together, make it into a whole family ordeal. You can even make it into a family challenge. I've had clients in the past who kind of make it into a challenge to see how many different colors each family member could eat each day. And whoever had the most is the winner. And then finally, I think that it's also important to model mindful eating. So when we're, having a new vegetable with dinner, so say we added broccoli, we can just kind of talk about it, talk about the color, like, wow, look how much more how bright that color green became once we steamed the broccoli. Talk about how it tastes or what the texture is, things like that, to kind of instill some mindfulness, can also be helpful in piquing their curiosity. So overall, remember to focus on whole, colorful foods that are minimally processed. And when we're talking about reducing some other things, you might consider spreading out the opportunities for consumption of those sorts of things. So maybe you get a soda once a week, or you get a soda on special occasions, things like that. And then just some ideas on how to add in more color. Smoothies are really a great way to get more fruits and vegetables into kids. You can buy a bag of mixed frozen berries from the store. You can buy some frozen spinach and add that in, and you can't even taste the spinach. So that's a great way. Stir fries are another good way to get a lot of veggies in. It's cold outside, so this is the season for soups and stews. And then regarding snacks, I mentioned, baby carrots, sliced cucumbers with hummus. You might also consider some apple slices and peanut butter, or some grapes and nuts. And then with lunches, just as you're kind of starting slowly, maybe you can add some lettuce to their sandwiches, or maybe you can add a side of cherry tomatoes and grapes. Perhaps next time you put in an order on Amazon, you can look up a new recipe book and get that, and you guys can work on, finding something that looks interesting to try together. Gardening is another great way to get kids really interested in food and understanding where their food comes from. Summer's right around the corner, so this is a great time to start planning our gardens. And then additionally, Kids Eat in Color, I would highly recommend them. I think I have, yes. So Kids Eat in Color, you can follow her on Instagram or her website. She's a dietitian who is a pediatric dietitian, and she just has so many amazing resources. And I just posted a couple up here you could take a look at that can help us as we're having conversations with our kids about nutrition. So rather than saying something like, this food will help you grow, or apples are good for you, you can give them more specific information, right? Red food gives you a strong heart. Yellow food helps your body heal cuts. Green food helps you fight off sickness. So these are some really great talking points. And then also when we're talking about sugary foods, when we want to reduce the amount of sugary foods that our family is eating, that our kids are having, there's a way that we can say it that doesn't kind of, bring a ton of negative attention to the plan, but also kind of gives them some understanding as to why we're doing this. So we could say, we're going to add in some new snacks and drinks to our list of food we eat. Which of these sound good to you this week? And that gives them some autonomy. Additionally, we can say, you can eat it when you're ready. So when we are showing kids new foods, they are probably going to resist, and that is normal. So rather than saying, okay, fine, you don't have to have it, if we say, you can eat it when you're ready, that gives them the idea that they will eat it one day. That's that growth mindset, right? And I also want to point out that it can take up to 20 tries for a kiddo to decide that they actually like something. So, please hang in there. And if it's been 3 or 4 tries and they are still not loving the zucchini or whatever that may be, just try a bite. Just try a bite. Maybe you'll like it today. Okay, you don't like it, no big deal. And finally, this slide about, what is our job versus what is our kids' job. I think this is helpful too, right? It's our job to choose what's available for them to eat. It's our job to choose where the kids eat and what's going on, meaning we can turn off the TVs, put the screens away, sit at the table. It's our job to choose when they eat and how often. So regular meal times are also very helpful. However, it's the kids' job to choose whether to eat what we put out or not. So saying you can't leave the table until you finish your dinner is not really helpful. And it's their job to choose how much to eat, because we really want to help them be mindful of their bodies and what they need. So Kids Eat in Color, I would totally recommend looking her up. She has great stuff every day. And here's the thing. One change is better than no change, and it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul. And we should also try to remember what it's like when we don't like something. So if we are encouraging our kiddos to try something new and they absolutely hate it, that's okay. I remember the time that I tried liver and onions and had like a visceral response to it, and it was just awful. And some kids have that same response when they have mashed potatoes or like a texture of something that just doesn't really vibe with them, and that's okay. So, optimizing our diet, optimizing our kiddos' diet leads to so many wonderful benefits that improve not just mental health, but also physical health and mental well-being. And, anything that we can do, no matter how small, is helpful. So overall, in conclusion, we know that our children's mental health is in crisis. We also know that there's not one single solution. And I am not saying that nutrition is the solution, but nutrition is one piece of the puzzle. And, if we can start adding up those pieces of the puzzle with things like this, that's a step in the right direction. And even though it can feel overwhelming, remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Start small, start with something you're excited about. Kids pick up on our energy and involve them, right? This creates buy-in, and it also alleviates extra work for you if you can get the kiddos to kind of help cook and clean and do all that, all the pieces that go into making a meal. And it's also important to make it work for your family. I can't stress this enough, but I don't ever want, nutrition to feel like one more thing. And just keep in mind those benefits, like we talked about: better focus, better social interactions, better resilience, better ability to learn. The point isn't to become perfect. And at the end of the day, what's most important is that we feed our kids. And if some weeks that means going through the drive-through a few times, that's okay, because we're all doing the best we can. We're all busy parents. We have work demands, family needs, things to do around the house. We're driving our kids to school. We're volunteering. There's a lot. There's a lot. So I invite you to, rather than considering this as a all or nothing option, I invite you to choose just one small thing that you can change this week. Just one small thing. So if you want to learn a bit more about what I've discussed today, this was kind of just the tip of the iceberg. These are some books that I highly recommend. And if you have any questions for me, this is my contact information. You can also, perhaps post a question in the chat, and I'm sure one of the other board members will be able to get it to me. But I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed talking to you, even though it's not really, in real life. I hope that you found this helpful. And please, 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 if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. And I think that's all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you.